Here's to the everyday heroes, the ones who sacrifice for others, who selflessly give their time and expect nothing in return. Here's to the everyday heroes, the ones who are there in times of trial, who make us smile and laugh, the ones who pick us up when we fall. Here's to the everyday heroes, the ones who do the thankless jobs, the dependable, reliable forces, those who press on in faith, who make huge impressions on our hearts and make a difference in our lives. They are our heroes.
What's up? Nah, I'm not doing that. My name's Robert, as you can see right there. I'm one of the youth pastors here. I'm also the pastor's oldest son, in case you didn't know. So, yeah, favorite right now. I get, actually not right now. My middle brother, Steven, just graduated from college. So he's graduated to the favorite position until Saturday when I get married, then I take it back. So, yeah. Hey, I got one more announcement for you. We've been, first of all, those first two announcements, you're talking children's ministry, the cool stuff we have going on with that. Talking about young adults, the cool stuff we have going on with that. So we got to get in on it. The youth group, man, we've been having fun. Riot on Friday nights. Things have been going really well. And actually, from really January to the last few weeks, we've been between 250 and 300 people here on Fridays. Yeah. What that means is I need more volunteers. And here's the deal. All the pastors are gone this week except for like me and Chad and Lynn. So I get to say whatever I want. So I need more volunteers. I specifically need men. We have a ton of great women that help us out. And probably a solid like 70% of our volunteers are women. I need the fellas to step it up. Here's the deal. After the service, what we will have is I'll have 2 or 3 people standing out in the hallway. They are our interns or our other people on our team, on our staff. They'll be standing in the hallway. They'll have sign-up sheets. And if you feel like, maybe you should have been doing this and you haven't started doing it yet, or you feel like God's pushing you to help us out, I would encourage you to sign up, and we'll contact you this week, all right? All right, so, yay. Now we're going to talk. So we're starting a new series. It's called Heroes. Our first hero is Joshua. Joshua is, he fought the Battle of Jericho. And he was the guy who followed Moses. That's a really tough job to have, man. Moses was like the greatest leader in the history of the nation of Israel at the time, And so Joshua, what happened was Joshua was, actually first, let me do this. I want you guys to, I don't have like a super cool, square that you have no idea what it means, and then right? I'm not that. I do have something, though, so here you go. I want you guys to draw this, all right? Just that. It's not anything specific, but draw that at the bottom of your paper. There's plenty of space. I had them make it with plenty of space, all right? We'll get back to it, but I want you guys to draw that. So, Joshua, the way it started was Joshua was a scout, and he had to scout out the promised land. This guy Caleb, and a bunch of other guys, they went to scout out the promised land, see what the Israelites were coming up on. And so they all go out and scout, and Joshua and Caleb are the only ones who come back yeah, we can do this. Everybody else is like, they're giants, and we're going to die, and wham. And so God says, I'm paraphrasing, but God says, okay, you guys are wimps. So an entire generation is going to pass before you get to go into the promised land, right? And so it's Joshua and Caleb. They're the only two that are going to survive this generation and make it. So that's how it starts, right? And then the entire generation passes. Moses, who is part of that generation, passes. It's like 40 years, right? Moses passes and Joshua takes the torch. And in Joshua chapter 1, I have it memorized, so I'm not going to read it, but I'll get my notes right. Joshua chapter 1, God tells Joshua this. He says, "Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Right? So this is Joshua. This is like Moses has died. Joshua's taken the reins of leadership. And there it is. Don't be afraid, right? And so this week we're talking about relentless faith. Relentless faith. Faith that doesn't give up, right? And the first attribute of relentless faith is that it overcomes fear. Relentless faith overcomes fear. Be strong and courageous. Don't be terrified. Don't be discouraged. See, it's been 40 years. Joshua has had 40 years for the thought to sink in that he's got to follow Moses. Right? Like, you're like, oh, he's had 40 years to prepare. He should be okay. No, he's had 40 years to watch a guy be awesome and realize that he's going to have to follow him. Like, it's like the guy who has to follow Tom Brady in New England. Right? Like, or, no, there's not a good Redskins quarterback. So, but, right? The guys who had to follow Dean Smith as head basketball coach at University of North Carolina. You know, the poor players who started playing on the Chicago Bulls after Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan left. Like, these are our equivalents, right? Like, how much must that be terrible? Like, but then you spend your entire life knowing that that's going to be your job. The dude's had 40 years for the fear to build, right? I get it a little bit. It's not like there's some plan, right? Like, I'm going to be the next pastor of NewLife Church. But I do happen to be standing here right now, right? Like, that's not going to happen. That's not, I don't even know that I want to do that, right? I love what I do now. We'll see where God takes me in the future. Hopefully, Florida. Love you. But, I do happen to be standing here right now, and I get the idea of the fear building over time. You know what I mean? I get that. The idea that overcoming fear, it really happens in a decision, in a moment, more than a process over time, right? Like, I don't know. You just kind of have to decide, this is it. I'm going to overcome it right now. I'm not letting it stop me. And Joshua does that. Relentless faith overcomes fear.
Like getting married?
Yeah, like getting married. I'm really excited about that. I'm actually not nervous. I don't know. Next story in Joshua, because they loved me and they gave me a sermon with 18 stories in it. Next one is Jericho, right? So they chapter 6 of Joshua, they come up to Jericho, and Jericho's like this fortified, like this fortress, man. It's got like 2 sets of walls, and it's like they're thick, and it doesn't sound very scary when you think about it now, but they don't have bazookas, right? They got rocks that they can throw with a sling, right? Like, that's what they got. So what are you going to do? But God, what's our plan? What's our plan? Walk around the city 6 times in 6 days, 1 time a day. On the 7th day, walk around it 7 times. Blow the trumpets at the end and the walls will fall down. Are you kidding me? Right? Like, we're supposed to be conquering the promised land, not leading parades. You know? If I was Joshua, I'd have been like, no thanks. I'm going to go back in the desert. Caleb can handle this. That's kind of, if you think about it, it's insane. I grew up in church, right? So I never thought about it. It's like, the story, and it's like, yeah, he walked around and the walls fell down, and that's just how things work, right? But it's insane. Walls came tumbling down. The walls came, that's from the song. That's the only way I know how to say it. The walls came tumbling down. Relentless faith moves forward. Here's the funny thing about God. You can be walking in circles, and you're still moving forward. God's plan does not live by our rules, you know? And relentless faith moves forward. More pointedly, relentless faith trusts God to move it forward. The next story is my favorite story about Joshua. They're fighting the Amorites. It's Joshua chapter 10. They're fighting the Amorites, and the day's about to end, right? They got the Amorites on the run. The day's about to end, and Joshua is kind of freaking out because what had happened was a little bit earlier, they were fighting another group of people from another town, and Joshua didn't really follow the rules. He didn't really send the army full force. He didn't really go to take everybody out, and it came back to bite him. He left the job undone, right? And he didn't follow God's plan. And so this time, the day's about to end, and Joshua's not about to let that happen again, right? He's not about to let that happen again. But what do? You know, they don't have night vision goggles, you know? Like, this is not SEAL Team 6. And so what do you do? What do you do? Joshua's answer was this. I'm going to read it. He prayed to God, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon." He called the moon out by name, right? So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. The sun stayed in the sky for another half a day. And I don't know about you, that's just not something I would pray and believe, right? Maybe I'm the only one, but I pray these big grand prayers, right? But on the inside, I'm going, I got a backup plan if it doesn't happen, right? You know? I'm not crazy. I feel like I'm kind of normal. Maybe if I was a good pastor, I would believe it all the time. But sometimes, I just I gotta, you know? Joshua prayed it, believed it, and it happened. Relentless faith always remembers why. The reason that this prayer matters and that is so cool is not, okay, the sun stood still, that's what makes it cool. The reason it matters is because Joshua knew exactly why he had to pray it. Because he knew why he was fighting. They had to take the promised land. You cannot wait another night. You cannot allow this to go on. We have to do it now. He remembered why he was there. He forgot before, he remembered now. Relentless faith remembers why. Remember why you're fighting. Remember why you do what you do. Remember why you have faith in the first place. Right? I'm done with the outline. So all you people who need to get that outline filled out, you're welcome. But here's the thing. I love this series. I'm really excited about it. I like this sermon. I actually picked this sermon I had a choice between two of them, and I picked this one. My issue, though, with it is this. If heroes become legends, and if heroes are legends, then they're not real. And if they're not real, then they don't matter to us. And if we learn lessons from these heroes, from these legends, then it gives us something maybe to strive for, but it's like this abstract thing. It's like, well, they were great, and I'm not that great, right? I'm not saying you're not that great, but you probably are saying that about yourself. You're not that great. Right? I'm not that great. I'm not Joshua. None of us are going to end up in the Bible, right? Probably not. So the lessons have to matter, and they have to be real. Because what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the greatest people in the Bible. And they were real people, and it really did happen. It has to be real. And here's the problem. Well, let me chart this for you. All right, this right here, this is our diagram that we're going to work with. This point here is the calling. That's the first story I told you. It's the calling, okay? Everything drops off. You got 40 years. in the wilderness. Don't be afraid. Jericho. And at least from a drama standpoint, the sun stops in the sky, right? You kind of peak at that point, right? You call the moon out and say, yo, stay where you're at. That's kind of the climax of your life, right? That's the trajectory of Joshua's life. This is actually a trajectory of a lot of lives in the Bible, a lot of the heroes in the Bible. Joseph had the dreams, told his brothers, hey, you're going to bow to me one day. His brothers got mad. They sold him. There's a little blip in the middle for Joseph where he kind of gets famous for a second. Then he ends up in jail. Then he becomes the most powerful man in Egypt. David, anointed king, chased by Saul, king of Israel. Right? Well, I guess this would be David and Goliath, actually. But, you have Jesus, right? You have this point in the temple that they talk about him. He's 12 or whatever. He's talking to the priest, hanging out with the priest. This is a high point. This is where, they knew he was the Son of God, but they start to see how wise he is and what's going on, right? And then he disappears. And he spends 20 years as a carpenter. The Son of God was a carpenter. And then 3-year ministry. One of my favorites, John the Baptist. All right? This point right here was before John was born. He kicked in his mother's womb when Mary walked in the room. The presence of God caused him to leap in the womb. Then he literally spends a large portion of his life in the wilderness. They thought he was a Nazarite. Some people, Nazarite, and then he was with this aesthetic community that did weird stuff. I guess it would be he was kind of like a mountain man, you know what I mean? Like a holy mountain man. And 6-month ministry. 6-month ministry that set the stage for the coming of the Messiah. It was one of the most pivotal save Jesus, the most pivotal ministry in the history of the world. 6 months. This is a trajectory of a lot of people. And here's my issue with Heroes as a series, right? And with this story, this sermon in particular, we spend all our time here. We spend all our time talking about that. And here's the thing. I think it's pretty easy to recognize greatness. Which reminds me of Muhammad Ali, right? There's nobody, I never saw the guy fight. I'm 26. There's nobody that can watch the videos of that dude talking, much less fighting, and not realize that he was considered in the sports world greatness. I think it's easy to recognize greatness. It's even interesting, it's fairly easy to recognize relentlessness. One of my favorite stories on relentlessness, Winston Churchill. He started out fairly well. His dad was a semi-successful politician. He became a politician and a fairly successful writer early on. And then in World War I, he became the first Lord of the Admiralty, which is the special British way of saying Secretary of the Navy, because they say everything cooler than we do. So he's first Lord of the Admiralty, and at this point he's a big success. He's an important man, because the British, they like their Navy, and he's in charge of it. And he gets caught up on this idea in World War I that basically was a failed idea, but he was just blinders, It was a strategic idea, and he got really caught up on it, and let's do this, and then it didn't work. And basically, he became the laughingstock. He lost his job as First Lord of the Admiralty, then ended up losing his job in Parliament. He ended up losing his job in Parliament. Now, this is a guy who's built his entire life around politics. And he's reduced to being basically a paid speaker sometimes and a writer. He's not very important in his own mind. And so he starts to rebuild everything. He starts to rebuild his life and, and all that, and that's great. And then Hitler comes on the scene. And, Britain really appeased Hitler for 6-7 years. And the prime minister at the time, his name was Neville Chamberlain. History would tell us that he was not the most strong person. So he appeases Hitler, all of this stuff happens, and the only person in Parliament screaming at the top of his lungs, this dude's a lunatic, he's going to send us into another world war, is Winston Churchill. He's still a laughingstock, though. People are like, he's a warmonger, we don't want anything to do with him. We don't want anything to do with him. Germany invades France, Churchill becomes prime minister, and he's still, about half of them think he's crazy, and they're waiting on him to fail. He didn't really help himself. He's a drinker. You know what I mean? He's a drinker. He's a smoker. A midnight. That's it. He was though. He was, and he didn't help himself out a lot. And then the Germans invade France. They just blow across France. And the British Expeditionary Force of about 300,000 men is stuck between the German army and the English Channel. And they end up being able to evacuate the British Expeditionary Force. Now you're talking about, it's about 300,000 people, about 30,000 guys die. It's a military success. The British actually have an army still. Because they would have been without an army. It would have been a crushing blow if those guys would have died. After that happens, this is a speech, part of a speech that Churchill spoke to Parliament. He said this: "We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and the oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We will never surrender." They just got knocked back. They turned tail and ran. And Winston Churchill, fat, drunk old man he was, stood in the gap. His relentlessness changed the course of world history. It's one of my favorite stories of relentlessness. But what allowed Churchill to have that kind of the gall to think that a tiny island nation could make it work? What gave him the strength to say, we won't surrender. They will kill every single one of us before this is over, if they want to win. What gave him the fortitude to do that? Is the wilderness. Here's the thing. It's a great sermon. It's a great sermon talking about overcoming fear, talking about moving forward, talking about remembering why. It's a great sermon. It is. I didn't write it, so I'm not like bragging on myself. I didn't write the outline. We wrote it together as a team. But here's the thing. I don't think most of us live there. Like, I'm standing up here talking to you about relentlessness, but I don't know. If I was in the crowd listening to this, I'd be sitting there going, that's great. I'll apply that when I get there. But right now, I'm just surviving. You want to talk to me about moving forward? How about moving at all? You know? You want to talk to me about remembering why? I'm not sure I ever knew. You know? Like, I know I work at a church, but I feel like I'm a fairly normal person, ish. And like, I just know I will sit in bed at night sometimes just like, man, you know, like God, I'm supposed to be leading, and like I'm supposed to be leading your people the way that you want me to, and I don't even know. You know, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do as a person sometimes, much less like what I'm supposed to do leading wise, you know? Like, I don't think we live here. I don't think we always live in this conquering place. I don't think we always feel like we are going to battle and God's got our back and it's all good. You know, I think we feel like, when is this going to end? Lamentations chapter 3. Lamentations was written by a guy named Jeremiah. He was a prophet, not a bullfrog. Just want to set the record straight. Here's the deal. I said that at youth group one time. They were like, what? Yeah. I'm really cool if you couldn't tell. Lamentations chapter 3. Jeremiah was a prophet during one of the worst times in the history of the nation of Israel. He witnessed he witnessed the fall of one of the kingdoms. He saw people starving in the streets, and so he wrote this in chapter 3. I'm a man who has seen affliction by the rod of the Lord's wrath. He has driven me away and made me walk in darkness rather than light. Indeed, he has turned his hand against me again and again all day long. He's made my skin and my flesh grow old and has broken my bones. He has besieged me and surrounded me with bitterness and hardship. He has made me dwell in darkness like those long dead. He's walled me in so I cannot escape. He's weighed me down with chains. Even when I call out or cry for help, he shuts out my prayer. He's barred my way with blocks of stone. He's made my paths crooked. Like a bear lying in wait, like a lion in hiding, he's dragged me from the path and mangled me and left me without help. He drew his bow and made me the target for his arrows. He pierced my heart with arrows from his quiver. I became the laughing stock of all my people. They mocked me in song all day long. He's filled me with bitter herbs and given me gall to drink. He's broken my teeth with gravel. He's trampled me in the dust. I've been deprived of peace. I've forgotten what prosperity is. So I say, my splendor is all gone, and all that I hope for from the Lord. I remember my affliction and my wandering. I remember the bitterness and the gall. I remember them well, and my soul is downcast within me. I think we live here. Maybe some of you don't. Maybe you're not depressed like I am. Like, you know. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we're not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They're new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. When they were settling in the promised land, when the Israelites were settling in the promised land, everybody, all the tribes of Israel got land, except for the Levites. They were the priests, and they said, "The Lord is our portion. We don't need land. The Lord is our portion." Right? You know, Joshua was able to overcome fear. He was able to move forward. He was able to have faith that the sun would stand still in the sky because he went through the pain and the bitterness and the darkness. Because his heart was broken by God, and God healed him. Because in this time here, he watched an entire generation of his nation die. He watched an entire generation of his nation die. He watched his mentor die. But when it was over, he was able to say, "The Lord is my portion. So I will wait for him." Great is his faithfulness. I want you to write this down. At the bottom of your page, just write, embrace wilderness. If you want your life to get to that place where you're conquering, where you are relentless, where you are, I don't know, that person you always thought you should be, you could be, that person you felt like God planned on you being, if you want to get there, you have to embrace the wilderness. You have to be willing to endure the hard times. You have to learn to have faith when God seems like a jerk. He's not. And if you endure those times, you will come to the other side and be able to say, the Lord is my portion, and I'll wait for him.
Father God, we thank you, Lord, for this message this morning. What a great message. And God, whether we're living in the wilderness right at this moment or have been for years, because I know some of you are, I personally know that, or whether we're on the upswing, God, we still need to be relentless in our faith. You can do so much in that wilderness. You can grow us so much in the wilderness. And yeah, it's scary. And sometimes we want to give up, God, but if we can remember your faithfulness, then we can overcome the wilderness. We can embrace it, like Robert said, but then overcome it and move beyond it, move forward. Father, help us, strengthen us, give us courage to do that. Keep our hope growing while we're in the wilderness. Keep our faith relentless in the wilderness. God, we thank you. We trust you. We know that you love us, and we thank you for that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.